Rachel. Thank you. So I don't think we need to start over. So we're talking about, the format for this session today. So we're gonna have multiple presenters. We can only answer clarifying questions, and then later on, you're gonna see how to submit other type of question. We're gonna provide a live demonstration of our application, the module. And then, like I said, thank you for the prompt. This session is being recorded so we can post later for people who are not able to participate. So it's better, especially when we're doing live demonstration, to use your computer versus a phone, like if you really want to follow along. And even when we go into the RFP, it's kind of better to have your laptop with you or your computer as our presenters go into the RFP, then you can follow along. Next slide. So the agenda today, so we're gonna start first with the Bidders Conference piece. We will gonna answer question only that are clarifying questions. Then we're gonna go to the application training and a live demonstration. And at the end, we'll do Q&A again for clarifying questions. And then we'll discuss next step in terms of when we're gonna post resources under the resource section in our of our grant page. Next slide. Some protocol. Again, we talk about the format. So we wanna say it multiple times that only clarifying questions will be answered via the Q&A. Content specific needs to be done online, and I think we have a slide to show you how to access it. Technical question needs to be submitted to helpdesk@thechildrenstrust.org. Next slide. So as I mentioned before, I'm sure by now you're familiar with our grant page. So as you log in and go there, you're gonna see ask questions. So if you wanna ask any question that is content specific, it could be general, it could be fiscal. So once you click ask question, you're gonna see a drop down that's gonna help you select the category. You're gonna have fiscal if it's about money, budget, and if it's a general question that's not specific for one or the other, you pick general. If it's something about the content, the programmatic one, you're gonna select service. Youth development. Next slide. So again, I mentioned before, technical question. What do we mean by technical? Oh, I logged in and I'm not able to see. I don't see some functionalities, and you're trying to troubleshoot on how to access something online. That's a help desk question. You would do it to helpdesk@thechildrenstrust.org. And the subject line, make sure you put solicitation, because we want to make sure, because we receive other tickets, so we want to make sure like this is relating to the solicitation. So make sure you do that in the subject line. Next slide. Again, we got many requests. We do currently have a resource on our website about previous networking form that was completed during the input session. So we know some other people, they've been asking like, how can I get my name on this list, right? So we today we're gonna reopen the form. And right now you see, you can take a picture. There's a QR code if you wanna do it on your phone. And also the PowerPoint will be available right after today. So you can access it via the PowerPoint if you wanna click on the form. And I believe somebody gonna drop the link to the chat as well. So you have many ways to access this networking form. What is the purpose? As you know, we really want our programs, youth development programs, to be enriching. We know that's gonna be very important for people looking for partnership to connect. So we wanna facilitate that by allowing you to fill out a form. And you can identify whether you're a lead agency or you're an enrichment partner, provide your information, talk about your specialty, and then so we can help you make those connections. So we're gonna keep this form open until Tuesday, because since we know you wanna get busy and start collaborating together, we wanna close it at 5 p.m. on Tuesday, so we can post the information in our grant page the next day, which is Wednesday. So if you're looking for a partner, we try to provide a space for you to collaborate. Next slide. And I think that was my piece for today. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Henson to go over a couple of slides.
Juliet, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our virtual bidders conference. We can go to the next slide. I'm just going to cover some general information before I think Tatiana will go into a little bit more detail section by section of the information that's in the RFP. Hopefully, many of you have had a chance to review the document that's out there. To start with, generically, this is some information about eligibility to be funded by the Children's Trust. This is very familiar information to many of you, I'm sure, because it hasn't changed in about 20 years. You can see the types of organizations that are eligible to apply, and you do need to be registered with the state of Florida. So you have to make sure you're in SunBiz. And then you can see there are a couple entities like the school system that are not eligible to apply directly, but they work with us closely as partners. And you'll hear more information later about if you're going to work in a school system site, getting a letter of support with that. And then you also to do business with us, you have to have a recent financial audit. If you're new to the trust, if you're already been funded by the trust, you've already been giving us your audits. So we have those. You need to make sure your recent audit is turned in, as required by your contract. Go on to the next slide. You're going to see a walkthrough later of the system, but I did just want to make the point that a lot of our boilerplate standard expectations and language is not in the PDF document that you have, like about the eligible applicants that we just covered. But all of that information is under the grants tab. If you hover, see that little red circled grants on our top menu of our website, you'll see that we have sections that go into more descriptive detail about eligible applicants, programmatic funding requirements, our legal requirements, our appeals processes, all that stuff that may be good bedtime reading to help you fall asleep at night. But that's also very important legal and technical for you to be aware of if you're submitting, because one of the certifications at the end of the application is going to say, yes, I read and understood all of this information. So I just wanted to make sure that you know to do that, or have someone else in your organization do it if that's not your thing. So the next slide is about our timeline. So you all know that the reason you're here today is that you know that the grant was released. Oh, go back one. It was released last week, and so we're here to talk about it today. You have from now until December 14th to submit your applications. We are in the cone of silence since the release started, since the release happened, and we will be until we bring the funding recommendations to the board. And so you see that marked there on the timeline. After December 14th and between February 24th, that's when we get to work on our side with our volunteer reviewers and our staff reviewers to really review all the applications with at least 3 reviewers and come to funding recommendations that then go to the board. We'll be going to the board in April for their approval. And then one notable thing is that the new funding cycle, the new 5-year cycle, is going to begin in the middle of August. And that is really a change that is our attempt to not divide summer programming across 2 contract years. For those of you who have been with us for a while, you know that if you do your summer programs into August, that usually straddles 2 contract years and causes a lot of sort of extra work. So we're trying to keep that whole by starting the cycle on August 15th. So these are important dates. They don't, for the most part, they're not going to be movable or flexible. The system is not going to allow you to submit an application after December 14th. It's going to remove that button that says submit, so make sure that you're making a good plan from now until then to manage the work of the application. Let's go to the next one. So there's more than $60 million currently allocated for this RFP. That is an increase from the current contracted amounts. We know, and our board knows and is supportive of the fact that to maintain our current programming, we need to put more money in just to keep our current programming levels going. There's been increases in program costs and wages. And our board recognizes that we need to make those adjustments where warranted. We are also, hopeful that we can have enough funding to do some increased programming, and you're going to see some priority areas that don't have as many program slots available for after school and summer programs, and we'd like to see some growth. So we will be hopeful that our board priorities may even lead to more funding than what's noted here, depending on the proposals that we receive. So right now, about 2/3 of our funding goes to support K through 5 programs. That's our elementary school programs. And we also have some additional funds that are available to programs based on services to kids with disabilities who have significant program accommodation needs. So if there are needs that are you're not expecting based on the proposal that you make, the Advocacy Network on Disabilities works with us to put an additional $500,000 into our programs to support those kids participating fully. So you'll see some of that described in the RFP as well. And you might be asking, like, okay, so you have $60 million, but how much can I ask for, right? And there's no easy answer to that question because some programs might want to propose one site, maybe only in the summer. Other programs are going to propose 6 sites, but in the summer and the school year, right? And some are going to propose the minimum group size, only 20 or 30 kids. While others might be a large entity that says, we have 300 kids. So the funding is going to vary based on those factors in terms of what you're putting together. So you just need to be aware and build a budget that is a reasonable budget. We don't want you to cheap out and give us the low cost bid that you then can't deliver on. So make sure that you're really looking at those costs to bring in high quality and retain high quality staff members and to deliver the enrichment. Somebody needs to mute, I think, but to deliver those enrichment experiences that we want to kids to be able to get from this new programming. So let's go to the next slide. I want to tell you a little bit about the input that we got leading up to this RFP last summer and up until actually just last month. We were collecting a parent survey of about 2,000 school-age parents that we pulled the data. The survey actually is still open. If you know anybody and you haven't, or you're a parent and you haven't filled it out, we are still collecting some last input to the parent survey, but we did pull the data in October. We had a lot of school-age parents in that survey that gave us input, and you're going to see their information and their input and preferences mentioned throughout the RFP document. We've been working with Q&Q Research Associates. We've gathered focus group information from kids in the camps last summer and from parents in the survey, as well as through parent focus groups. So you can see there some of the numbers and types of people that we talked with in focus groups. We've had listening sessions as well, with the added piece that you're going to hear about system involved and disconnected youth. We had several sessions with various juvenile justice and dependency system partners, and also some CBOs that specialize in those populations to gather input. And then, of course, you all, many of you probably were on our July 6th meeting where we had input available to submit to us, and reactions and thoughts to the direction we were going. So more than 500 of you participated in that input and networking session. So as I said, you're going to see highlights about this content throughout, and that's really meant to help you plan your program. If you want to know what parents said or what a certain subgroup of parents said, some of that is summarized throughout the RFP. Let's go to the next one. So this is what we call our theory of change. All that means is, why should we fund youth development programs? So essentially, our logic is that if we provide safe and enriching, high quality after school and summer programs that meet age appropriate needs for kids from the time they start school to the time they finish, and we support those programs, support their academic health and social and emotional well-being, they're going to be essentially better off, right? They're going to be better off and succeeding academically, as well as socially and in their life in general, not getting involved in things that are risky behaviors, and being on a positive trajectory. Next slide. Juliet made reference to this, but we had a few aspirations for the new 5-year funding cycle that are listed here. You know, we wanted to increase efficiency and continuity, so we combined our K-5, some of you might call it YAS, even though that was the cycle before last, and our 6 through 12 programs, some of you might still be calling that YIN, into one RFP, one contract, one RFP. Flexibility, so we've removed some of the prescriptive activities and scheduling requirements to open up for you to design, innovate, have more creative youth choice in your programs. That enrichment, we want kids who maybe never would get exposed to certain things to be able to get exposed to fun and engaging specialty learning experiences. We also, with the separate application that's possible for a system involved in disconnected youth, we really are seeking to increase our engagement and support of youth who have complex needs. And we are also aiming to streamline our outcomes, reducing some data collection burden and having more meaningful results. So I just want to stay on this for one more second and say, for those of you who have been maybe funded by the trust or around with the trust for a long time, this is not a save as exercise. You need to put some time and thought toward developing your application. Do not just propose your program the way you've been running it because you've been running it, or maybe you run out of time and you just copy and paste from your contract into this. Don't be complacent. We didn't do that. Like, we didn't do a save as and just put out the same RFP. That would have been a lot easier. But we knew there were things that needed to change. And, maybe some of those things are things you have already been incorporating youth voice and choice in your programs, but you need to tell us about that, and you need to highlight that. And you need to really think about your schedules and your activities. There have been people in the past who have sort of just plopped in their contract straight into a grant application, and current providers who, it's not that common, but it has happened, who didn't get funded again because they didn't score well in the review process, because they didn't pay attention to what's in the current RFP you're applying for. So, make time for those things, pay attention to the changes that are in this RFP. A lot of times we hear people raise concerns or issues with trust requirements, and sometimes they're not really trust requirements. They're like, oh yeah, we did that 3 cycles ago. We required that 3 cycles ago, and people are still believing that we require it today. So get yourself up to date. Make sure, that you're not just continuing old requirements that we've dropped because you haven't gone out to figure out a new way. And so, you want to bring in, as Juliet said, that flexibility that we're giving you, it actually gives you some more work to rethink and bring in a new design. You also, I just want to touch again, need to rethink your budget. You need to be paying staff reasonable salaries. You need to have professional services, maybe from experts, outside experts. Maybe don't expect your staff to know and do everything. Get that expertise that you want to bring in to build the varied program enrichment activities that you want to bring to kids. And just one note, you can apply to any of the great population groups that we have. So if you want to stay only with K-5, that's fine. Only with middle school, that's fine. Only with high school, that's fine. Or you can do any combination of those. But just remember that in the funding decisions, you may, if you apply to do all the groups, right, you may, we're going to be looking at strengths and weaknesses. So make sure you're putting a strong plan for each one, because just because you apply for all the groups doesn't mean you would get funded for all the groups. You might get funded for the groups that you put forth the strongest application for. So go on to the next slide. Oh, can you just click until all the content comes on this, because there's an animation. So ultimately, we have some approaches that we've incorporated and we've been working on for a number of years now to improve well-being, and functioning for children and families in the community. And this is really involving our social and emotional wellness. You might hear us call it SO. And how that relates to our READY, you might hear us call READY, which stands for Racial Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. So and READY, as you can see in our model, they work interactively. Social and emotional readiness is a focus on creating environments that are healthy, supportive environments that can be inclusive and embracing of all staff and participants. Incorporating the learning about social emotional wellness into your daily life and into the way that you function. Sometimes we know the racial equity, diversity, inclusion, people with differences can cause conflicts, which is healthy. It's part of life. But if you have a healthy social and emotional wellness and awareness, you can work through those conflicts in a very healthy way and come through that in a more supportive manner. So we really think that these two things go hand in hand, and you're going to probably be hearing more about our Trust Academy partners that support all of our funded providers. And we have a new lead agency. The YWCA is our lead agency for SO and READY, and they're going to be rolling out supports for staff that are working in funded trust programs. And then those essentially we expect will be trickling and supporting down to the families and the children that you all serve. And in the center of this cycle, this continuous back and forth, is our continuous learning and quality improvement processes, which, we're a learning organization, and you're going to see more about that in a later section of the RFP. But these are some standard foundational principles that we are following at the Trust. So go ahead to the next one. I think I have one more. This one is more of a technical. I talked about the eligible agencies in the beginning, but one of the other things that's a new requirement that we're putting in place in this funding cycle is that a lead agency cannot fully delegate the services delivery to exclusively to subcontractors. Essentially, we don't want any pass-through grants. We want to be funding directly the agencies that are delivering the services to the greatest degree possible. Now, there might be partnerships where you're delivering some services and you have a subcontractor maybe managing another site. That's fine, as long as the lead agency is operating directly and the majority proportion of the services that are going to be delivered. And this is really because we found that it's really the best way to have good communication, to do the CLQI, the continuous learning and quality improvement, and to make sure that the trust requirements are being met. And now I think I'm going to hand it off to Tatiana. Is that right?
Yes. All right.
Go for it, Tatiana.
Thank you, Lori. Good morning, everyone. So exciting to be among almost 500 participants, if I'm saying correctly now. As Lori and Juliet mentioned, we're going to be together for quite some time. So I'll introduce myself again. I'm Tatiana Canelas. I am one of the Associate Director of Programs at the Children's Trust, and I will be going through the content in the RFP. As you have probably already seen, there is a lot to read, a lot to double click into. So we will be going through tying the aspirations that Lori mentioned to what it has turned into requirements and expectations in the RFP, double clicking into some important information to understand, and then answering some clarifying questions that you will be posting. So we want to start off by explaining the pre-application. And Lori already mentioned that there's these possibilities of these two different applications that you could submit a proposal for. And if you have already gone into the system, what you have noticed is that there's these three different options for application types. And understanding what you're selecting is critical to what you will be submitting. So the three application types are the following. There is a K through 12 application, that is that K through 12 group that we have been mentioning, which could be the elementary K through 5, the middle school 6 through 8, or the high school 9 through 12. And as we have mentioned, you don't necessarily have to apply for all age groups. You can, but that is that application. And then there's a separate application if you choose to apply for the system involved youth. And that is a separate application if you have been serving these youth and have that background and experience. There's a separate application that's available to you. And then so the options are 1, the K through 12 application, 2, the system involved youth application, or if you are saying, I want to apply for both of these, I want to fill out an application for both of these, there's the option to select the 2 applications, which is the K through 12 and the system involved youth. So in the pre-application, and I'll show in the next screen what that looks like, there's these 3 options that you just want to carefully select, because once you select it, is what opens up to the next step. And it's important to note that if you do select to apply for these 2 applications and you submit, they will be independently reviewed for funding. They won't be reviewed together. These 2 applications will be separately reviewed. So in the next slide, so on here, you'll be, sorry, go back, Orthy. So on here, what you will see is what one piece of the pre-application looks like. And there's this narrative that is, of course, critical to read, but these are the 3 options that I'm referring to. The first one says, create only 1 application for the standard K through 12 program. That's only one. The second one says, create only 1 application for the system involved youth. I am only choosing to apply for the system involved youth. So you would select that option. And again, if you're saying, I want to create 2 separate applications because I want to apply for these 2 different populations, you can do so by selecting the third option. So again, it's important to understand that there are these 3 different options, and what you select will trigger what applications open up. Okay, so that was just really important to understanding and getting us to the actual breakdown of the different sections in the RFP. What we're going to go through is the different sections as you see them in the RFP, and we'll be double clicking into some of the content. As you see on the screen, these are all it. So we can go to the next slide. Okay. So this slide will show you some of the key abbreviations used throughout the RFP for population and timeframes. And again, understanding those population and timeframes and what you are selecting to apply for is critical. There's the different grade level and age groups. So there's the elementary K through 5, which is referred to as ES K through 5. There's the middle school, which is MS 6 through 8. There's a high school 9 through 12. And there's also an option for youth transitioning from foster care in state support programs, which is the FC, and that's age 23. So again, in the application, you'll see all these different abbreviations, and what you select in the beginning is what's going to trigger to have different options across the application. These are universal. There are universal focus with supporting children with youth negatively impacted by poverty and lack of opportunity and related to neighborhood and social factors. Again, as mentioned, there is a 2 applications, so you won't see all age groups across both if you select both. And then the system involved youth is from ages 16 through 21, and we'll double click a little bit more into that around what that means and what are some expectations if selecting to complete that application. And then another important piece is that there's time frames that you can select to apply. There's the school year, which is referred to as the SY, and then there's the summer, which is the SM. Now, important to understanding is that you can choose, again, just with the age groups, you can choose to apply for all or just one of them. With the time frames, you can also opt to say, I just want to serve in the school year, or I just want to serve in the summer, or I want to serve some age groups in the school year and some age groups in the summer. These are all very critical and important pieces to understand because they provide a trigger impact across the rest of the application. So what you select in the beginning and understanding that piece is very important. Okay. So as you will read, also very critical and important to our funding and what our aspirations are for the next funding cycle is that children and youth who are exceptional learners, you'll read about it throughout the RFP. And it's important to understand that it's expected programs include children and youth with disabilities, accommodating their needs so that they can fully participate in program activities. There is an expectation that the proposed number of children with disabilities to be served at a site is a minimum of 15% of the total number proposed, or if you have been funded for youth development, that it is in line with past trends at the site if they have been higher. If you have been funded, you won't see a number now in the application that says this is your expectation. That happens during contracting where we'll be able to have conversations around that. And the minimum percentages apply at the site level for each population and each time frame. So if you're proposing to serve elementary and high school, that 15% for that site is 15% at a minimum, right? 15% for middle school, 15% for elementary. And then also by time frame, if you're choosing to apply for both school year and summer, those expectations will be set across those as well. As Lori mentioned earlier, and we'll always allude to the supports that our Trust Academy partners provide. Our Trust Academy partners support in these inclusion goals. We have the Advocacy Network, who is our Trust Academy partner when it comes to children who are exceptional learners, children with disabilities, and they help us with programs with meeting those goals through training, coaching, and program inclusion financial supports as well for children. And then something that we want to call out in line with serving a children with disability and the percentage is programs may very well propose specialized programs, and that is when 40% or more of children and youth with disabilities is proposed. And this is really only if programming is specialized for the needs of the proposed group, and that there is specialty staff and trained who can provide these different services and supports for this population. Applicants can very much propose these specialized programs, but it's really important to understand that these programs do not simply should not simply be just general youth development programs serving a segregated disability population, that this is indeed an inclusive program. And so that is, again, important to double click into the RFP. There's a lot of information, more than these bullet points to understand. And then something also that we call out is the gifted children and youth who have a lack of economic resources and opportunities that will help them reach their potential are also a priority. How will program designs also interact and engage this population?
No. That's Lolo.
I'm gonna mute this participant. Okay. So as we mentioned earlier, there's this other separate application that that is an option for application, and it's the system involved and or disconnected youth. So in this new youth development cycle, we are considering new and better ways to support vulnerable and hard to reach youth. The trust has always very much engaged and looked to serve this population, but through feedback, as Lori mentioned, we have really gathered a lot of feedback on how we can improve services, how we can really reach these populations. And so we now have, again, that separate application that you can apply for. And an important component of this is that applicants must have previous experience with serving this specific proposed population. The population is high school age youth from 16 to 21, and they're either in the dependency or delinquency system involved, and as well as they're disengaged from school and or work. So again, when thinking about this application and applying for this, it's important to keep in mind that that previous experience, what that looks like can be, of course, included in the application, but it is an important component of applying for this. So again, it's still in line with the system involved and our disconnected youth. Funding for youth enrichment supports that can be offered within the context of additional services. Again, this is really that the applicant is able to demonstrate direct linkages, possibly directly through partnerships or through services being provided. So it's in addition to wraparound supports that are tailored for this population, and that can include care coordination, therapeutic trauma, mental health supports, as well as substance abuse treatment or other health services. We know that this is a complex population, with multifaceted needs, and so the priority will be really to fund this component through agencies that have existing partnerships in place already. So this is really in addition to and shouldn't just be standalone. Having those supports already in place is critical to this, to serving this population. Okay. So we talked a little bit about like the specifics of what we hope to see across children and youth and serving children and youth who are either exceptional learners, children and youth, and our percentages expectation with serving children with disabilities, as well as the system involved youth who I shared some of the highlights, but again, double clicking into the application is critical. And then something else that you'll see is the expectations around our outreach, marketing, recruitment, and retention. We do expect that all funded programs are always at capacity, right? That all funded slots are fully utilized. And this really means that programs are at full enrollment with high attendance rate. We really want the youth and children to be attending programs, to be engaged in these different enrichment supports and activities that will be provided through the different program designs. We do have contractual marketing requirements for all of our funded providers. And what we hope to see is what are the recruitment strategies that programs are proposing and will have in order to meet the certain requirements and to be able to engage the different youth and children. And Lori shared with you some of the input and feedback that we have gathered from parents and families. And you will see that through the RFP. In the document, you will be able to see what some of those results are, and very important information that should really help inform and guide programming. And retention and engagement, what that looks like is that there's high interest, that the youth and children and families can keep coming back to your program. And something that we have that we want to ensure that is addressed through programming is the transportation needs. Through feedback with providers and with families, that's a critical point that has been called out through the different stakeholders that we are also seeking to understand what your programming is and how you will address these transportation needs. And then also, what are the options that are being provided around special engagement supports? This is all in that space around outreach, marketing, recruitment, and retention, and really understanding who is being proposed to serve and how will they be engaged to then maintain attendance and participation in the program. Next slide. So in this, in the service sites, you will see a variety of different pieces around where services are being proposed. And so one important note and something that you'll read about is this a place where you would want to spend time? What the site where the site is, what the site look like, how does it engage youth is a critical piece of selecting a site. And we want to ensure that these sites are not only safe, but they're welcoming, that they truly engage the youth. And so when thinking about sites being proposed, we want to ensure that that quality piece, that space piece, that environment piece is also in mind. And then there's also some requirements that could be very specific to either the age group being proposed or to the site location. And so that could be for the elementary K through 5 school year programs, there is a DCF childcare licensing requirement. And we won't really double click into the process and all that, because all of that is embedded within the RFP. But it's just really important to consider that if you are proposing to serve the K through 5 population during the school year, that this requirement is there. And then the other one is that if there's a proposal for Miami-Dade County Public School sites, that a letter of support must be included with that site. And that again also entails a process that needs to take place. There is a request that you start that process at least 3 weeks before the deadline. And again, what that looks like and what it entails, you'll have to double click into the application. But we really want to call out that if you are considering a Miami-Dade County Public School site, that there is a process to getting that letter of support. And we also encourage everyone to understand what are the potential costs associated with the sites being proposed. As Noreen mentioned, really taking a look at your budget and what is being proposed should very much be in line with all the pieces of program design, from activities to service sites as well. Next slide. So in the service sites section, you'll also see our ratio and group sizes. And what this really tells us is that there's two pieces to it. You'll see it by grade level. So there's the elementary, again, the middle school, and the 9 through 12. And one of the columns, what it's calling out is that there's a maximum child to staff ratio. And you'll see that it varies by the age group. So for elementary, that maximum child to staff ratio is a 15 to 1. And for middle school and high school, it's a 20 to 1. So that's one important piece to keep in mind when looking at your program design. And then the other piece is that there is a minimum group size per site. And so what this means is that if you are proposing a site and you're proposing a specific age group, to keep in mind that your proposal should be in alignment with the minimum group size per site. So for elementary, that's 30. So if you're looking to serve a site with elementary children, the minimum that you can propose for that site is 30. And then for middle school, it's 20, as well as for high school. Okay. So this slide looks like a lot, and it includes a lot of words, but it's really to help understand, and we'll show it in the following slide, that there is this table on there on the RFP that provides a breakdown of what the expectations are for service sites at the site program level, and also for the participant, and what those expectations are. And double clicking into that and really understanding that there are expectations and requirements around program participation by age group and by time frame is really a critical component. So each age group has set expectations and requirements for program operation and child and youth participation. The table that we'll display in the following breaks it down by age group and by time frame. And again, it's important to pay close attention to that because it may very much vary. In this section, when you start filling out your sites, is also where you'll be able to select the full day option. So although the full day option it's a time frame, it's here in the site is where you would say if you want to provide full days, which full days are those days being operated, such as teacher planning days or in the breaks. Here is where you would select that option and where you are able to plug in for what age group during the school year you are proposing to provide full days. And then there's a special note, and once Rachel goes through this piece in the application side of the training, but I do want to call it out here that if you select a time frame for any age group, the system will populate it for all. So you might select that you're serving middle school and high school, and you might select that you are serving you just want to serve for summertime, the middle school or not the high schools. Because you have to select that time frame, it will give you the option to also fill in the fields for high school, even though you're just looking to serve high school for the school year, not for the summer, but you want to serve middle school for both. The important piece to keep in mind with that is that the system will automatically show all the fields, but if you're not planning to provide that time frame for a specific group, you just have to enter 0. And we want to call that out, and I promise you that it will make more sense if you have either been in the application already or once Rachel goes through it. But we just want to say you don't have to serve that if that's not what you're looking for. The system just prompting that. You just have to enter 0 and you can move on with the rest of the fields. Next slide. So I know that this table probably looks very small in the screen, but we do want to call it out and we do want to share with you because it's important, again, to understand that there are expectations set for program operation, and it's by time frame and by age group. Now, the RFP, as you will see by these requirements, will not fund drop-in programming. There are parent preferences around what they're looking for, and you can read that through the narrative information that we included around the survey information in the different sections. But this is really to say it's not drop-in programming and there's specific requirements. So as you can see, you have school year and summer. And then when you double click into each row, you have the expectations set by age group with special notes in there. So the first 2 rows, those show the expectations at the site level for duration and frequency. So that's at the program site level. And then the bottom 2 rows show the expectations for the participant. And again, it's really important to understand that there can be these expectations at the program site level, but then there are also these expectations for what is it that we're expecting to see the child and youth, how often should they engage in these services and for how long. And so just understanding this table and understanding how it aligns with the RFP is very important. Next slide. And so once you fill in all these different components in the site section, and again, the site section, understanding how you fill it in is important. You only have to enter the site once, and then from there you're able to select the age group and the time frames. It's important to have a summary of everything that you pretty much entered. So what you will see following you entering all that information for the sites is this summary table that gives you a breakdown of all the age groups that you're proposing, as well as all the different informations based on what you entered. Now, if you just select elementary, the site table will still show middle school and high school labels and fields, but it'll just show 0. If you select to apply for all, it'll show the information for all. But it is important to understand that it's not an error if you see middle school and high school. It's a summary table that will show all the different breakdowns, it'll just show 0 if you're not proposing for the other sites. And then it's also important to know that this table summary is for children with disability percent, as well as for service days. There's a calculation behind it. We do want to say that this table is mostly for once we're looking at applications and making funding recommendations, it will be helpful for us. So we just want to call out that this table is there, but and that you should double check just to make sure that it looks in alignment with what you entered. But there's not much action to take from it other than to know that this is a summary table. For middle school and high school and for summer timeframes, we ask for information in the site table at weeks. What number of weeks are you proposing to serve? But the table summary is looking at information for number of days. So we're just calling out so that you're aware that there's a calculation for number of days on there, which is the number of weeks that you're proposing. So for middle school and high school, 36 times the number of weeks that you're saying you're going to serve, which is 4 days per week. And that is what's going to give the service days. Again, we just want to call out that this is a summary table, mostly for internal purposes, but that it's there because if you see it, you're going to want to know where is this information coming from. And then the other piece is that the proposed percentage of children with youth and disabilities and the service days is a weighted average from the data entered at the site level. So again, we really don't expect you to sit there and do these calculations. The system will do it itself. This is more, again, for us to understand at a glance what is being proposed. We still double click into each site and each age group and each time frame. Next slide. So in the next couple of slides, I'm going to hand it over to Arthi from our research team, who will give a little bit more information and overview on the maps that are embedded within the RFP. These maps are included as a resource in the resource section, and they provide certain level of information. So there is the geographic areas. There's the census designated, I'm sorry, can you go back one slide? The census designated places identified for expansion. And then there's also the community redevelopment agency. So I'm going to give a little bit as to the why we include and what we include, and then Arthi will actually navigate and demo the maps for you. So we do show the current distribution of after school and summer program sites that are funded through July 2023. And so that really is to just give some visibility as to like where have these sites historically been funded and what does that look like, what they currently include, and they're through our current funding cycle, which ends July 2023. And then the maps will also include information based on the current census data for several geographic areas that have been identified where there is current limited funding in relationship to the number of children and youth that are living in poverty. And so you will see on there that applicants are encouraged to propose new expansion sites in the areas that have been identified. And then additionally, the community redevelopment agencies, we have agreements with these 2 community redevelopment agencies to fund programs within those boundaries. Now, this is, a lot of information that is embedded within these maps. And it's also very important to understand what those areas are identified for expansion based on current census data. But we do want to say that this does not mean that sites that have been historically funded will not be funded. We are just identifying and highlighting those areas where there are services that are currently very limited or perhaps non-existent. And that it's just really important to double click into that and see how does that fit into your application. Next slide. So this is another table that you will see that includes those areas for expansion. We won't go through all of them here, but we just wanted to make sure that we called it out and say, please take a look at it. We are encouraging that there are programs that expand into these areas because we know that there's a need. And then I'm going to hand it over to Arthi from our research team that is going to double click a little bit more into the maps.
Thank you, Tati. So as Tati mentioned, based on the current census data, there are certain geographic areas that have been identified where there is currently limited number of funded program slots in relation to the number of children and youth living in poverty or those that experience lower access to economic resources than what is required. The first map on the left you see here is for school year sites, and the one on the right is for summer sites. The areas in need of more YD services are identified in purple. And the yellow dots are the sites that are currently funded for youth development by the trust. And the numbers, the numbering on these sites correspond to the site list that is provided in the resources section of the grant that you can look at once you log into the grant page. And we also have an interactive map, the link to which is provided in the content of the service site section. We will be looking into that in a minute. And applicants are encouraged to propose new expansion sites in these areas of need. In addition to the areas that we saw in the previous slide, the trust has agreements, as Tati mentioned, with two community redevelopment agencies, which we like to call CRAs, to fund programs within their boundaries. These two areas, as you can see in the map here, are Overtown and Omni. As shown in the map, there is a need for more youth development programs in the Omni CRA for both after school and summer timeframes. Again, applicants are encouraged to apply and propose new expansion sites in these areas. All of these maps are present in the resources section, along with a site list that is broken down by K through 12, K through 5, 6 through 12, and then summer and school year timeframes, as well as you can also look at the slots and the site information in there. So in addition to the traditional static maps that we just saw, we have an interactive map that is available for exploration with more or less the same details mentioned in the last two slides. And this link is again present in the service site section of where the content is. So when you click into this, into the interactive map, you can basically see what we saw in the static maps. And these are the legends here. The green circles or the green dots are basically school year site locations. And when you zoom in, you can see Overtown and Omni here, which both of which are the CRAs that we mentioned. And the areas that are colored in pink or purple are the sites that are areas for expansion based on high need areas. And you can click into what is called the layer list here on the top left-hand corner, and you can add certain layers. For example, if you'd like to see summer site locations and not school year site locations, you can click in and you can go back and see that the legend has changed. The orange diamond shaped pointers are the ones where there are summer site locations. You can also enter a zip code or an address or a neighborhood in here. And just double click into the sites in that area, or just try to understand what programs are available. And you can also see the census data points for demographics or site information. You can see what the total population of is and how many children there are within the 5 to 17 age group, and things like that, all other data points. And you can look into this to see the census data points in the area you're currently serving, or areas that you're looking in to expand the sites. So I guess that's it from me, Tati. Thank you.
Tati, we have a lot of clarifying questions. So if you don't mind, before we move to the next section, and I can read them out. And then I'd just like to invite Juliet and Lori and Gretel and anybody that would like to support in responding to feel free. Okay, so I just want to say, if you do not hear your question read out loud, that is because it's not considered a clarifying question, and we would just ask you to please go through Trust Central and the question and answer function and submit your question there, and we will respond to you. If you're not sure how to do that, there were some slides at the beginning, but we will show again in the live demonstration for the application training again, how to submit questions. Okay, so the first one is a clarifying question: is the minimum number of participants for each group, K5, 6, 8, and 9, 12. I think, Arti, if you want to go back to that slide, or Tati, if you want to just reiterate it.
What was the question? Sorry.
What is the minimum number of participants for each group? Here's the slide on the screen. You can see it for K5, 6, 8, and 9, 12. The next question is a 1-month summer camp eligible to apply for any funding in this RFP, or once a week enrichment classes?
We can click into the program participation slide, but on there, it truly, what we need to look at is, so this is where this table comes into play. So if, let's say you're proposing an elementary, or actually no, for summer, all of our requirements are a minimum of 6 to 11 consecutive weeks. So that's the expectation, the requirement around the number of weeks that you need to serve in order to be a summer camp.
I see somebody raising their hand. If you could please just type the question in the chat, we would appreciate it. Is the minimum amount of participant per middle 20 and high school 20? Does that also apply to teens and youth with disabilities?
Sure. Do you want me to answer that one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So you can propose a special, as we said, you can propose a specialized program, and you can justify the need for the ratios to be shifted should you be serving a population of children with disabilities. The important piece is to be able to justify. Again, just because you're serving children with disabilities doesn't always mean that they might need that smaller ratio. It's really important to be able to say who and why you would need to be able to move away from the expectations that we have for our ratios and group size. Lori, I don't know if you want to add anything else to that.
No, I think you got it, Tati.
Okay.
For clarity, you must have 15% children with disabilities per site and not overall total number of participants if you have more than one site, and that is correct. Yes.
That is correct. Per site, by age group, and by time frame.
Correct. Is there a minimum age for special needs students in the through 21 age group?
it needs to be in alignment with our, so if you're asking about the K through 12 population, the minimum is the kindergartners, the K through 12. So it's through 21, but not, you can serve kindergartners, first graders. It really depends on the age group that you're proposing to serve.
Are summer sites required to be licensed through DCF?
At this time, summer sites are not required to have DCF licensing, but it's important to always refer to the DCF requirements and the DCF website for any updates or changes around that. But at this time, I don't know, Rachel, if you want to add anything else.
No, that's current requirements. We work with incarcerated youth ages 10 to 18. So is system involved youth correct?
Ages
So
10. Mhm.
Go ahead.
So our current application for system involved youth is for the high school age group 16 through 21. I want to say that for the 16 to 21 age groups, if you meet the criteria that we have discussed, which is you have this previous experience and you can add on, you currently have existing partnerships, wraparound services, you're welcome to apply for that age group there. I want to say, and I'll have either Lori or Juliet chime in, that for the younger age groups, we're not saying it's that you cannot serve this population, but you would probably have to apply for our K through 12 application for the younger group.
That's correct, Tati.
Okay, let me go over here. Okay. Corporations, do they also need an audit? Yes, every applicant needs audit to submit audited financial statements unless you're a current provider and we already have your audit on file. Okay, for both a school year and summer provider, what will be the fiscal year?
It would be the
The
August
contract.
15, 2023.
I think we might need to clarify that question because that's the contract year that you're saying, Tati.
Mhm.
Your own agency's fiscal year doesn't change with this. So if you're, whatever your agency's fiscal year is, that's what your fiscal year is. The Children's Trust fiscal year is October 1. It's always going to be our fiscal year. So the contracting cycle will begin on August 15th of 2023 and will be through August 14th of 2024, the first year, right? So that's a contract year. It's not the fiscal year. Your audit would be done on your fiscal year, whatever your agency is.
Correct. Can you combine middle school and high school with 20 students combined, or each program must be 20 middle and 20 high served separately?
Yeah, the expectation is set by age group. So the 6 through 8 is, the expectation is for 20 at minimum. And then for the high schoolers, the expectation is set at 9 through 12 well, we have the age group, the child to staff ratio. And then I think this question is more around group size. The minimums are set by age group.
Do we submit separate letters of support and letter of support request forms per age group? For example, one for K-5 and another for 9-12. If this is related to Miami-Dade County Public School support request form, the instructions that are provided should be followed. I believe it's one letter per organization, which would include all of your school sites. If it's other letters of support with enrichment partners or other professional services, it would depend on what the service is being offered, would be included in the letter of support.
Sorry, I'm the one that actually asked that question. Can I just put something in there for a second?
Can-
if it's
can-
one. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Can you just type it in the chat? Do you mind?
No, that's fine. It was just in addition to what we were talking about, but I can do that. Okay.
Okay, it's if you have one karate enrichment partner that's providing karate to K-5 and 912, it's fine to include that in one letter of support from that one organization. What is the maximum number of weeks that the trust will fund? School year / summer.
Do you want me to answer that one, Rachel?
Sorry, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I'm reading onto the.
Yeah, so that's based on the expectations. So for example, if you're saying you're going to serve, let's say middle schoolers, it would be the 36 weeks. And then depending on the number of weeks that you're proposing, there is a 6 to 11. So the maximum would be based on the 36 weeks, which we're expecting to see, plus the 11 weeks. I think that might get a little bit more into having a question around staffing and year round, but that would probably be more specific, and it would need to be in the Trust Central questions, if that's what that question is going to.
The slides, this session is being recorded, and this recording as well as the slides will be posted on our website later today. Okay, Tati, will the trust cover cost of transportation to the program location?
Yes, we allow program costs, but please refer to our budget manual as far as what requirements and expectations we have for transportation.
Okay, I think there was a clarifying question about the audit. Can we submit the audit before we submit the application to the TCT? Can let us know whether we meet the requirements. The audit is required to be submitted with the pre-application. However, you will not be getting feedback on the audit before the application becomes available to you. So I would suggest that you go on our website and read the audit requirements, where you can find out exactly what's required.
Yeah, and I think I saw a clarifying question around group size and increments to propose, and those would need to be proposed in increments based on the maximum group size. So if you're proposing elementary, the minimum group size is 30, but if you need to propose in increments of 15 if you want to go above that.
And there was one more around services for youth with disabilities should be to age 22 as current contracts by age 21. And so what we said in this slides is that it's through age 21, which is the same as essentially what we have now, which is up to 22nd birthday. I don't know, Gretel, Laura, if we saw any other clarifying questions. One more clarifying question that just came in. You can no longer have a program that combines middle and high schoolers in one program.
Yeah, I can answer. You can certainly have middle school and high schoolers. You can propose the 6 through 8 and the 9 through 12. It's just important that the group sizes are followed based on those age groups. Now that the 6 through 12 it's no longer 6 through 12, it's broken apart. We've created requirements around those age groups based on different pieces, such as we talked about input from different stakeholders and all that. So it is important that to understand you can certainly propose to serve both age groups, but each of those now could have distinct expectations.
There was one last question about the fiscal year. The Children's Trust fiscal year has not changed. It's October 1st to September 30th. The contract year for these contracts will be August 15th, 2023 through August 14th, 2024.
Yeah, there's a question. Can you clarify pre-application versus application? I can answer that one. The pre-application is pretty much helping set up the remainder of the application, if that makes any sense. So the pre-applic, because we have these two distinct applications, and then we have requirements around the fiscal component, it just helps set up the expectations and ensure that someone doesn't create an application that perhaps isn't even able to serve in Miami-Dade. There's questions around charter school, around MDCPS, as well as the audit component piece. So they're not these two separate pieces. They're just the application, the pre-application is the starting point to ensure that you meet these very important pieces prior to starting, and also to setting up and understanding who you are asking to apply for. Is it the K through 12 universal one, or is it the system involved youth, or is it both? Because what you select there will trigger what opens up next. So they're not necessarily two very distinct pieces, but it's just the starting point. I don't know, Rachel, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, no, and I think that we should move on because we still have a lot of content to cover and we still have the application training to go through, and we want to make sure we get through all of our content. So if your question was not answered, please remember that you can submit it through Trust Central. Right in the grant application, it says ask a question, and we're going to show you again during the application training.
Yeah.
So go ahead, let's move
Okay.
forward.
The pre-application, while Aarti gets her, does not have a different due date. Okay. So we talked about population and sites, and now we're really getting into the program design, right? So all these different pieces do come together and are part of program design, but the program activities is really the space where you are able to tell us what will programming for these participants look like. And this section right here, it's really a summary of the parent and youth interest expressed during our different surveys and during the focus groups. I don't know why it's showing green on the screen, but okay. Go back one slide. Okay, so important to know about program activities. All activities should be intentional, age appropriate, for high quality and engaging activities for the children and youth. So in the K through 12, because now if you're possibly applying for distinct age groups, it's important to keep in mind that with that flexibility and that ability to design programs, we are still expecting to see that the activities meet intentionality and age appropriateness. As well as it's important to keep in mind that to include in structured and planned programming is at least 75% of the operational hours. And that is when you're thinking about and you're seeing the different requirements that might be there, what that looks like. All program activities should be fully inclusive of children and youth with disabilities. And there is flexibility to propose creative and innovative programs that incorporate youth voice and choice. And really youth voice and choices, because we have heard through input from participants, from providers that, you know, we have been working with the youth, we know them, this is what they're telling us, but it could be that maybe because you have this requirement, we're not able to do it. Now we're taking away that, but what we are saying is that you really need to understand your youth, the children that you're serving, and what they're looking to serve, and that should very much be embedded into program design. And then to really minimize time on screens and electronic media, we know that the current world that we live in, that is really front and center. And again, we're not saying that this cannot be included in programming, but what we are saying is that it should very much be intentional, because we know that youth and children already are spending a lot of time perhaps on screens and on electronic media. So there has to be intentionality and really much be embedded into what the programming is if you are going to be including that. And and if you're seeking that intentionality, then it should really hope to minimize that time spent on screens and media, unless it's part of an enrichment activity or an activity that you're doing. Next slide. So one of the things that you'll read in the application when it comes to activities and program design is that we are hoping to see varied approaches to learning. And that there's really this balance in program design around instructional and thinking time and experimental and doing time. And that balance should really reflect a 50-50 time spent on each activity. Through the instructional time, what we're hoping to see is that the children and youth are involved in learning through research and investigation, and that at least one of these incorporate the application of reading, writing, listening, and/or speaking, and that using these creative approaches and methods infuse literacy into these activities. And what this really is telling is giving that flexibility is to have these spaces where the youth are thinking and learning and perhaps doing something that seems a little bit more academic, but that it's being done in a way that engages them and keeps them interested. And so that instructional and thinking time, again, this is a highlight, a summary of what we're hoping to see and expecting to see. There's a lot of examples within the RFP around what that looks like, and much more in depth into what should be included. Next slide. So I talked a little bit about the experimental and doing piece, but here it's really that what program designs and what programs should embed into their program is the ability for youth and children to be involved in hands-on and physical activity that they're doing and making and creating and building. And again, that is just not this very standard, you're sitting here and you're reading this ditto or you're doing this, but really based on what they're learning in that thinking space and incorporating into those writing and literacy skills that they're also able to do, perform, build, and act upon. At least one of the approaches must incorporate regular physical movement activities, because we know that this is important, that this is a space where they'll be able to do fitness and fun and teamwork and cooperative play. So again, that intentionality behind program design is very important. So although there is this flexibility, there are approaches that we are requiring to see that's embedded within these activities. And then of course, we know the importance of field trips, but that these field trips that are off-site in the summer and are required incorporate what they're currently doing through these different activities and times. Next slide. Okay. So this slide gives just a summary of what those required program activities are. And again, it's important to double click into it because we won't get into like each requirement by each age group, but each age group does have very specific needs and requirements that are embedded on there. But for all, what we are saying is that 2 to 4 enrichment program areas that each participant should have an experience around. So there should be 2 to 4 enrichment areas embedded into program design. Additionally, there are these academic success supports that are expected and required for program activities. And then there's a basic health and wellness support that are also embedded as part of programming. Next slide. So this is another table that gives a really at a glance look at what the expectations are. I can't say it enough that really reading word for word the RFP is going to give the most information, but these tables really help us understand at a glance what the expectations are. So this one specifically, if you see what's in the little box highlighted in pink, are the 2 to 4 enrichment program areas. So from here is where you would select the 2 to 4 areas that you're looking for. And they can vary by age group and by time frame. So you could say for elementary, it's this, for high school, it's this, for middle school, it's this. the important piece to understand is that it's 2 to 4 that each participant needs to be able to have access to throughout programming. And then this table here, the one that's highlighted right now, you can double click into it, but these are the possibilities, right? Like what is possible? What are these different enrichment areas? And when you go into the application, you'll see these as a drop down, but you will see that there's also the possibility of adding other. And there you can justify and say what that other is, but you will see all of these possibilities, and within each kind of area, you'll be able to see if there's something that's not there, you'll be able to propose. And then there's the space of program activities, the academic supports. So these, again, they vary by age group, but for all timeframes during the school year, there is a homework and academic support piece that needs to be part of programming. And there's some requirements around that you will read in the RFP. And then for the grades K through 5, differentiated literacy instruction, DLI, is still very much a requirement for this age group. If you have been funded for with the trust for this last cycle for K through 5, you won't see group literacy. And that again is because we have said and use that into your programming. We're not telling you how often and what that looks like specifically as group literacy stands now, but we're saying it has to be embedded, but DLI still stands. And that is because we know that this intervention, this time of one-on-one or a small group setting is critical to this age group at this time. And so that still very much is there and has very specific requirements around who and how that activity looks like. And then for high school only, there is that high school completion supports that are part of programming and must be for this age group in the school year and in the summertime. Next slide. And then we have the basic health and wellness support. And these are the basic health and wellness is not to be confused. There is an enhanced health and wellness that it goes into the enrichment activities that you can propose if those are the needs and enrichment areas that you are looking at. But these are should be in our requirement, which is the healthy foods and beverages, the social and emotional wellness of program staff, environment, and interactions. And we'll click a little bit more into that when we talk about outcomes at the program level. And then there's also the family engagement and connection component that, again, it should be embedded as part of program design. Okay. So on here, what we really want to call out and say is the importance of program enrichment experiences. That exposure for children and youth to areas of special interest that they might not be otherwise be able to experience if it wasn't for the programming that they're receiving. That these are intensive services that can help youth and children acquire and master new skills. And that goes back to them being very intentional, very focused, and very youth voice and youth choice driven. That all children have exposure to at least 2 of these enrichment areas offered by the program. And that there is a strong expertise in the proposed areas of specialty. And really that goes in line with the last bullet, which is that there's the appropriate in-house external, that there's either in-house or external staff that are able to provide these high quality services. When we're saying that they should have these exposures and that they're very intentional, who is providing those services should also be very intentional. And so we are very much saying and encouraging that if the in-house expertise is not there and you want to provide this specific enrichment area, to seek that external professional service that can come in and provide that experience to the youth and children. And something just very important also to keep in mind is that, again, these enrichment areas, how they're offered and when they're offered throughout the school year and through the summer, they don't have to stay the same. You can propose what this looks like. And they could very much be different in the school year and in the summer timeframes, as well as by population. So the implementation partners and the enrichment component go very much hand in hand. As we're saying, we're encouraging that if that in-house a specialty is not there, that you seek those implementation partners that could really bring that specialty into your program. And when you're reviewing the application, and you'll see that there's a section, implementation partners, that is where you are able to say who is going to provide that those services or that activity or that area. But we do want to call out that there is this important piece of taking a look at, if you're proposing this program design, the who is behind it is critical to ensure that it's the best enriching activity that can be provided to the youth and children that you're serving. So in the implementation partner section, what you'll see is that you can select, you can add those partners that provide some either kind of support, some piece of programming for this application. And they can either be paid or in kind, and that you select based on who it is. And then for the paid partners, there's these two options. There's a professional service or there's a subcontractor. And it's important to note that the subcontractor will trigger for there to be a budget detail, a detailed budget that you provide on the subcontractor and who you're entering this into this activity understanding component of programming with. And then another very important piece is that if you have a paid partner, whether it's a professional service or whether it's a subcontractor, you must submit a formal memorandum of understanding or letter of support with your application. Next slide. Okay. So now we're getting into participant outcomes. And in participant outcomes, what you will notice is that there's these common required outcomes for all programs that have been selected for the Youth Development Initiative. And pretty much what one of the aspirations, as Lori mentioned earlier, was that we took a deep dive into our outcomes and what we have been collecting. And we said that, we wanted to ensure that what we were collecting was around program impact and that it was necessary, and that in that same time as we're doing that exercise, that we could reduce some of the data burden perhaps of entering all these different pieces. And it's not to say that those were not important or that they're not important, but we really wanted to streamline and say, okay, what are these common required outcomes that we could have all of our programs embed into their programming. And so there is a list of what those look like. The applicant, as an applicant, you can propose to include additional participant outcomes that are very specific, perhaps to your enrichment area or to your population, to tell the story of what the work that you're doing is. And additionally, there are adaptions and alternative assessments that are an option to meet your participant needs. We know that there's some programs that might propose specialty programs, or that they're serving a population or youth that might require adaptions or alternative assessments, and that's still very much a possibility, and you are able to include that and justify and explain that within your proposal. But just very important to understand is that these common required outcomes are going to be an expectation for programming. One of the required common outcomes is now this youth family parent impact input survey. Again, when we were thinking of our aspirations and really taking a look at what we wanted to collect, is that hearing directly from the participants of program is going to give us back a wealth of information to really help ensure that we're providing and ensuring that there's impact in our programs, and tell us the story about what is happening in our programs. And so that will be a required outcome. There is a questionnaire example in the resources that you can take a look into, but one of those required outcomes for all programs will be this participant impact survey outcome that will be there. And then there's for next slide. And then for DLI, as I mentioned, DLI has very specific requirements and expectations. That's the differentiated literacy instruction for the K through 5 age group. And that one will still have this, the ORF or the MAISE as a requirement, because in order to know who needs to receive this intervention, who needs to be a part of these small groups and DLI instruction, then you'll need to know through a pretest who needs to receive this. And so that outcome is still there, and you'll see as a requirement for the K through 5 space. I don't know, okay, why that slide is showing like that. So for staffing expectations, as you will see, there's a lot of wealth of information to double click into, but in staffing expectations, what we really want to hear and see is that there's an acknowledgement of the diverse strengths and needs of the children and the community that you're serving, and that all these different characteristics are taken into consideration when staffing your program. And that that all staff serving these youth and children are expected to develop these strong relationships with the children and youth and families that they're serving. And the staff should also have knowledge and expertise on the community that they're serving, and that they're able to really provide them with the appropriate culturally competent services in the languages that they're spoken, and that they're reflective of the youth and children that they're serving. And that you'll read throughout our staffing section. And very much have to answer around how that is being embedded and done in your program. Next slide. And I kind of alluded to this before when I talked about the enrichment areas, but incorporating that strong expertise into the specialty program and ensuring that you have that in-house external, either that in-house or external support to provide these high quality services in the related areas is a critical component of program design. The what and the who. And then again, that it's not that your program needs to have these specialty areas, that you can seek these supports through these professional service specialists. And then for the system involved youth, we know, and we've heard through community feedback and these different input sessions that we've had with different community members, providers, that youth benefit from staff who have been in similar situations previously and have come through successfully. And so thinking about that in that program design is also very much a staffing expectation for that population. And then carefully hiring and ensuring that the supervision structures are there is critical, and you'll have to answer to us, how is your program doing that? But additionally, ongoing staff professional development, planning time, as well as competitive market pay rates and benefit, all support with program design, and also that continuous learning and quality improvement of all youth development programs. Next slide. So we always go back to the elementary, the ES K through 5, and those requirements around differentiated literacy instruction, because again, those have very specific requirements. And so for the staffing for that activity and for this component is again very specific. And once you double click into the RFP, you'll see. But we want to highlight that those that provide this instruction, they must be delivered by qualified and trained teachers with a background in reading instruction. And we have opened up what that looks like through this next funding cycle, again, based on community input, on hearing from our currently funded providers and some of the changes that have happened in this post-COVID world. So what you will see is that there's these different alternative models, that it doesn't necessarily can just be a certified teacher, but it is someone with that background in teaching and literacy instruction. So that means that it could very much be a bachelor's level professional with at least 2 years of relevant reading instruction, with experience in private or charter schools, teachers that are working towards their certification, retired teachers, or those that are no longer maintaining an active certification, and early childhood teachers with associate degrees that are DCF certified. So again, this kind of opens up the possibilities as to who But just keep it in mind that there still are requirements, and this is what this looks like. Next slide. So now in the budget place, once you go into the budget, and pretty much it has been a relevant theme across the entire application that if you are applying for multiple populations and timeframes, everything is entered pretty much by time frame and by population. So when you're completing this very important critical component of your application, which is the budget, that you refer to the budget manual. Because the RFP, again, it gives it gives instructions, it gives guidance, but when it comes to the budget manual is a piece that should be referred to when thinking about this. And it's in the resources section of the application. Now, something to know and to keep in mind, and that you'll see once you get into the budget section, is that the funding request breakdown is again by time frame and by population. So this will require for you to truly have to think about and be intentional about who am I proposing and what my funding request looks like across summer and school year if proposing both, and across population if proposing multiple. And then for every line item, you must complete the required fields, enter a justification and description, including the calculations to determine the cost, as well as to determine the cost and the amount requested. And if applicable, identify who that matching or what that matching source is. And when I talked about the implementation partners, I said that for subcontractors, if you select a paid partner that's a subcontractor, there is a separate detailed budget that must be filled out. Now, I will define, this is a question that comes up a lot. It is embedded in the RFP, the definition about a subcontractor versus a professional service. But just to make sure that we understand, a subcontractor is an independent agency or entity that has entered into agreement with a trust-funded provider to perform or oversee some component or a subset of sites on behalf of the provider. Now, professional services, which we have been alluding to a lot when we talk about enrichment services and specialty programming, that's a service of independent contractor, instructors, facilitators, or other professional services or entities engaged in a distinct service to participants. So when you are filling out your implementation partners, when you're filling out your budget, it's important to identify and understand those two different components. And then in the budget, we want to make sure that we clarify that although you will see that the budget is not rated, this is a very important and critical piece of the application that you need to fill out, be very intentional about, because it is what is used to make funding recommendations. So you will see that the budget is not rated by the reviewers, but it is very much used to make funding recommendations. So the time, effort, and how it fits into your program design should be very well thought out to ensure that your proposal, your programming is in alignment with what you're seeking as funding. Okay, I promise we're almost there in application training. There's just a few slides left. So we do have, again, our continuous learning and quality improvement. And in this section, what you'll see and read is that the Trust is very much a learning organization. And likewise, we expect all of our funded programs to take on these ongoing practices on program operation, quality improvement, to ensure that they're providing the best services to those that they're serving. And in this section, you'll read about our continuous quality improvement framework and what that looks like, the different components that we look at in metrics, which include the ones that you see on the screen: staffing, service delivery, data quality, population focused program, participation, and participant outcomes, which we pretty much went through all those pieces. So you'll see that there's a theme around like what we look for in application and how it translates then into program implementation, as well as how we're looking at the expectations for each program. And everything that we do is very much in collaboration with our funded providers. We take a collaborative and reflective process to review data, to talk about the data, to what's the story behind the data. And then we also have, and we've talked about the different supports in place, such as the one that we spoke about for children with disabilities, where we have these expectations, but we also have supports around training, peer-to-peer learning and coaching in place should we see that providers are in need of some supports. And in this section, really, you're talking about how your data and data practices and viewing of data are embedded into your programming to ensure that you are also a continuous and learning improvement program that looks at all this information to engage in these practices. Next slide. And an important piece of this is that when we talked about the outcomes, I didn't mention it there, but I will mention it here, that we are measuring social and emotional wellness of program staff to environment to interactions through a required outcome, which is the Weichert Center's SELPQA, which stands for your social and emotional learning program and quality assessment. And this is pretty much where our content area teams go out and will observe each site by a trained observer at least once per year. This has been done if you're a currently funded program. For our 6 through 12, we have been using this tool, but it will not be now be the same tool that's used across our youth development initiative. And also there's an expectation that providers will conduct a self-assessment observations at each site at least twice a year. And then you can read on here the different domains and you can double click into it in the RFP. But the important piece is, again, that we want to gauge the social emotional wellness. We have expectations around that in throughout the initiative and the RFP. And so this is really how we're looking to see that impact is happening. And then we have organizational capacity. And this is really where you're answering questions and you're responsive to your agency, your mission, your history and past performance of services being delivered, as well as your background and qualifications as it stands for this application. And on there, you'll see the different questions. If you are a new applicant, you will have an additional set of questions to respond to, but just keeping in mind to be responsive to how your history, past performance, and how that it has an implication and how you will describe and ties into the current application that you're providing for. So I think that this brings me, next slide, to the end of all the sections. And as I mentioned, this was really, even although we double clicked into some things, reading the RFP and taking a deep dive and reading it multiple times and really understanding what the proposal entails is critical. Hopefully this gives you a little bit more around our aspirations as well as highlights for our next funding cycle for youth development.
Thank you, Tati. Thank you, Tatiana. And I would like to make an announcement before we get into the clarifying questions. So for given that we went over our time, and I would like to respect all your time today, I don't want us to prolong this to 1 o'clock. So what we're gonna do, we were supposed to do the application training. What we're gonna do, we're gonna continue, we're gonna record it for you, the application training, and try to not to make it too long. And then we're gonna post it later on. So would that work for everybody?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Perfect, perfect.
Yeah.
So,
Definitely.
all right, that's right. So it's overwhelming. All right, Rachel?
Okay, so we're gonna just finish up the rest of the slides and then we'll spend the last remaining time until 12 o'clock answering as many clarifying questions as we can. So there's still some more slides, Aarti. Oh, yeah. Yeah. The review, yeah, right there. Yeah, okay, good afternoon, everyone. I know I've been popping in and out, but my name's Rachel Spector and I serve as a director of programs at the Children's Trust. So it's nice to see so many familiar faces as well as so many new faces. So as Juliet mentioned, we're gonna just go ahead and finish up with the slides and talk about the review process, and then The team is going to finish recording the application training and it will be posted today. It is very detailed and we recognize that this is already a lot of information, so we'll break it down. Next slide. So we just want to remind you though, next slide, Arti, on our website where you can find the grant. So if you go to our website at the top, you see a grant section. And then when you click on the grant section, it's going to bring you to a page. Next slide. That looks like this. You could just keep clicking, and then you're going to click into grant opportunities. And when you click into grant opportunities, this page will come up. There's a video you can watch, and then you'll see a link at the bottom called View Current Grant Opportunities, and that will take you to the page where you can log in. So we just want to review for everyone the review process. So it's clear to everyone how it will work. Next slide. As Tatiana mentioned, these are the different sections of the RFP, and each of the sections will be assigned a rating by the review team, except the budget. Although, as Tatiana mentioned, it's still a very important section, as the executive team will use it to determine funding recommendations. So the rating scale is a 4-point scale. We are spending a lot of time training our staff, and we'll be training volunteer reviewers. So essentially, every section is rated on this scale. It's from 1 to 4. 1 basically is you did not respond to the section, did not respond to the questions, you're missing major substance in this section, through up to an excellent response. So an excellent response 4 is essentially you responded to everything, every single requirement in the RFP, and demonstrated that through your application, and you went above and beyond. So you are actually exceeding the requirements set forth by the solicitation. We just want to make sure that everyone's aware. Again, this information is included in the document, so you have access to it as well. And then we also want to call your attention to the section weights. So every section is not created equal and not worth the same, if you will. So it's important just to understand which sections are weighted the highest. So as you can see, we are putting a lot of emphasis, the most emphasis on program activities. This is really the meat of your program. What are you proposing to do? What are you offering to students? And then also implementation partners and staffing is the next in line is important. So it's just important to understand how each section will be weighted, so you understand how the final scoring will be done. And then we mentioned and then in terms of a fiscal, okay, and then so it looks like they switch in. So the review process is, I think Juliet mentioned it at the beginning, is very comprehensive and very transparent. Every single application is reviewed by a team of 3 reviewers. That will be 2 Children's Trust staff and 1 community volunteer reviewer. And they, each team, if you will, of 3 people is assigned a group of applications to score. They are assigned and they go their separate ways to review the application independently. We are in the cone of silence, so even reviewers will not be discussing the applications with each other. When they have completed that process, they will come back together to a debriefing meeting, which is a publicly held meeting. The meeting notices will be posted on the website as well, and it is a public meeting, so everyone is invited to attend if you'd like. And in that meeting, the reviewers will come together and they will discuss how they scored the application, and they will enter their final scores for the application. Just to reiterate, that score alone does not mean that a program or an application will be funded. There are many other factors that come into the final funding decisions. Additionally, a fiscal score is assigned, a fiscal score rating is assigned to each of the applications. And then based on that information, we identify a viable pool based on score and fiscal rating. And so once the viable pool is identified, the executive team then completes an initiative review and also may schedule interviews or site visits if they feel that's necessary. And during the initiative review, what we're looking at is geography, sites, coverage, expansion areas. And so we're taking, and then score, and we're taking activities. We're taking a lot of different information into account. And then our executive team and our CEO will put forth the funding recommendations to our board. In terms of the fiscal score, for those of you that are new, this is the sort of formula. It's a potential of 12 points. This is for new applicants that are new to the Children's Trust. We use your submitted audited financial statements to determine the organization's fiscal solvency. And we measure this by assessing the current ratio net assets as a percentage of annual expenses and current liabilities as a percentage of the total annual expense. So each ratio out in each column is scored up to a total of 4 points for a total of 12 points. And for current providers, we are going to use your financial audit that we already have on file, combined with your program-specific audit to come up with a fiscal rating. Okay, so that is the end of our content and our review process. I think we have about 20 more minutes and a lot of clarifying questions. So again, just to remind everyone, if you do not hear your question read out loud, it's because we determined that it is not necessarily a clarifying question, or we're not sure if it's a clarifying question. So we're going to ask you to go ahead and submit the question through the system, through Trust Central. So I'm going to go here and I'll read them out, and then Tati, I'm going to look at my team. So if you guys can just help with the question. So I am not clear on transportation guidelines that was mentioned. The transportation guidelines for after school guidelines.
Yeah. So, I mean, in the application, we have questions around understanding the barriers for the population. So that you will need to provide to us. Now, in the budget guidelines, in the budget manual, there are specific it's under travel participants, specific requirements or expectations around what can be budgeted for. So I don't know if there's what the specific question is. It might be one that you need to drop in the questions and answers. But the budget guidelines that we mentioned are those in the budget manual that when you're budgeting for transportation, you really need to take a look at to ensure that it meets those.
And thank you. I'm going to ask a question, and then Bill, William, Kirtland, are you here? Because we have a couple clarifying questions.
I'm ready,
for audit.
Rachel.
Okay. So the audit requirements, whatever you request your audit must show at least 15% of that. For example, if you request 400,000, your audit should show you have at least 50,000, correct? I believe this hasn't changed. So
I'm wondering if that's a guideline question, maybe having to do with the administrative indirect support, because I can't think of any other standards that are applied that have we have a percentage requirement is with 15%.
Okay, so if whoever asked that question, if you could just clarify that question by submitting additional information through Trust Central, that would be great. One more question. Fiscal, are our subcontractors required to have a fiscal audit?
At the time of application, they are required to have a fiscal audit, and even when you're contracted with the trust, in the ongoing years and management of your program, we do not require a fiscal audit be provided to the trust of your subcontractors. However, there is a provision built into the contract requiring that the lead agency that is supervising the subcontracted provider services, that they do apply their own standards of monitoring to the subrecipient organization. So sometimes organizations decide to require or pass through that audit requirement to their subrecipients, or they just apply their own standards and measures to checking on the invoicing and the activity of their subrecipient organizations to make sure that if those documents were tested, that they do qualify and meet the standards set by the trust as allowable expenditures, as programmatic expenditures.
Okay, well, thank you. One more. If you are submitting for a program in Overtown, are there additional funds available through the CRA, or is it one amount listed in the RFP?
There's not necessarily additional amounts made available because you're a CRA district. It's just that we are going to make the best possible efforts to make sure that we have allocated a portion of our funding equivalent to the property taxes that were in revenue that were generated by that CRA district. So we will ensure that that CRA district does receive a comparable amount of funding that was, like I just said, from the revenue derived from that district. So we're going to identify enough programs to make sure we meet that requirement.
Okay, awesome. Okay, there's a question about the title. So on the pre-application, what title is recommended, as it indicates enter with care. So the reason we put enter with care is that A, you cannot change your title once it's entered, and B, if you are an applicant that is going to apply for both applications, system involved youth and K through 12, the title will be the same for both applications. So we're suggesting that you make the title generic enough to cover both applications if that's the case. But not to worry too much, as that's not taken into account in the score, but just understand that once you enter the title, it cannot be changed. Okay, Tati, I'm gonna just keep reading for you as well. How often is it expected to do the enrichment activities per week?
The enrichment activities is based on program design. You would have to double click into the expectations of age group, but they could vary. But we don't have a set, you need to do your enrichment activity X amount of days a week. What we do say is that participants should all have access to at least 2 activities, and that they are happening continuously throughout the program timing expectation, which varies by age group as well.
Okay, a couple more about the activities and the enrichment activities. So to clarify, offering more than one art form does not meet the requirement of 2 to 4 program areas, does it? Do you need to provide the arts and STEM, for example?
So if you're offering, I think the question is, if you're offering arts and you're offering dance and visual arts, that would meet the enrichment criteria. You can have a subset of the arts, but it can't just be, I'm going to just do dance. There has to be a variety. And then keeping in mind that with your enrichment activities, you have these 2 approaches that you have to embed, which is movement and literacy or writing, like literacy in some type of way through writing, speaking, the different things that we mentioned. I don't know, Rachel, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think the question is the confusion is about the areas. So you don't have to choose necessarily 2 areas. It could be 2 activities within 2 to 4 activities within one area or spread across areas.
Exactly.
What if an enrichment provider provides multiple enrichment areas, SEL, physical health, and nutrition, and soccer, for example? Is this 1 enrichment or 3?
We're not, I mean, you would have to tell us what that professional service or provider is providing to your programming, but you need to call out the activities separately by age group. So if the service that you're being offered is that we do SEL, soccer, and I don't remember the other one that you mentioned, as a package, what we need to understand in your program design is what is being applied to the participants by age group.
The next question is, can an agency submit one K-12 application for themselves and another K-12 application as the lead for another agency? And the answer to that is no. Agencies may submit one application for K-12, and if you have experience and meet the criteria, one application for system-involved youth. Is there an application just for summer camp and another application for after-school programs? So no, they're both part of this one application for K-12. You need to, as Tatiana mentioned, indicate the age ranges you're going to serve, as well as the different timeframes. And after school year is one time frame, summer camp is another, all contained within this application. Is there a required common outcome for SEW?
Yes, the required common outcome is the program level one. It's the SEL PQA, the social emotional program quality assessment that will be across the entire youth development initiative.
There's a question that says, are we allowed to use our own tools for measuring social emotional learning, or does it have to be that specific assessment?
You are welcome to add additional outcomes, but for the SEL program level, it is a required that the SEL PQA is used.
Still need clarification on the number of students in the different age groups at the sites for providers primarily serving children with disabilities. The application says to propose numbers that align with the needs of the proposed population.
Yeah, so if you're proposing a specialty program and you're seeing that the ratios that we are saying are requirements are not in alignment with the population that you're proposing, then you would have to provide that justification and need to us through your application. That's why we don't necessarily have a set, and that statement is pretty open because it really depends on the needs and the justification that you're providing on who you're serving. I don't know, Rachel, if you want to add to that.
No, I think that's fine. Can an implementation partner provide DLI services?
Yeah, yes, as long as they meet the staffing requirement that is in the RFP, professional service can be used for the DLI.
And there was a question related to, I believe related to DLI, is about how many certified teachers do we need working on our program? So the requirement around DLI has changed in terms of staffing. There was a slide on that. And so as long as they meet the requirements that are allowed under the RFP, that is who you would need to provide DLI.
Yeah, and I think if the question is how many, we won't be able to tell you, but it's based on the number of children that need the intervention, and that you would know from the pretest. But understanding, I guess, who you're serving should help with the proposal.
Is there an application review tool that reviewers will be using to evaluate the RFP? If so, can you please provide a copy? The reviewer guidelines are included in the RFP. When you download the document, they are included. They are also included at the end of each section. When you watch the application training, we'll be showing you and pointing out exactly where it is. So when you're filling out your application, you'll be seeing the reviewer guidelines at the bottom of each section, as well as at the end of the RFP, they're all together, compiled sort of in the 1 or 2 pages. For the budget summary, is this the entire organizational budget or just the projected budget?
That's the projected budget.
Mhm.
The amount that we are looking for in there is for the budget, the proposed budget, not the organization.
And then Bill or Brenda, can a new applicant use a fiscal agent?
I think maybe what you clarified earlier and probably can do better, Rachel, is the terms of which you can use a fiscal agent, but there's requirements of that fiscal agent. I think if they're the lead organization, there's the requirements you mentioned earlier about their, I guess the expectations as far as their program delivery.
Yeah, there should not be any pass
We-
through. So if the fiscal agent is expecting to also provide services, so that's a yes. But if the fiscal agent is not doing any services, that's no.
Correct. Okay, I think the last question, I'll go back to the chat and check. Are you required to offer both summer and after school services? And the response to that is no. In the RFP, you're able to select both the age range as well as the time frame. So you could select just after school, just summer, or both after school and summer. Are there any other questions in the chat? Let me go back. Oh, there's a couple. Okay. There's a lot of questions I think that just came in that I think are not necessarily clarifying questions. So again, if we don't read it out loud, please submit the question through the system, but there is a clarifying question about measuring outcomes of students and staff on CLQI. So can you clarify for measuring outcomes of students and measuring staff on CLQI? Is the program responsible for that? And do we add it in our proposal, or does the trust do those assessments?
Yeah, so that will be, there's two parts to that. There will be a piece where the trust will go out and do the observations. And there is a piece where there's a self-assessment. I think at this time we'll be able to provide the tool around that because we're saying that it's a requirement. So there's two pieces to that. I hope that answers it. There is a program observation that the trust will go out to do, but there's also an expectation that the same tool is used to observe your different sites that should you be funded for at different times in the year. And we have provided access to that tool in the past, so you should have access to it again.
There's a question around the ratio for DLI. And it is gonna remain the same, 1 to 5. So this is a clarifying question, Dati, around the high school age. If we propose to serve 100 youth in 9-12, can we break that up into 4 cohorts?
Too.
Can we break that up into 4 cohorts throughout the school year, or do all 100 need to be served year round?
Yeah, the expectation is that these are slots and that they'll be served year round.
Okay, this is a question for Juliet. You say the contract start date, this is repeated, is going to be 8/15/2023, but current contracts end 7/13/2022. How do we account for 8/1 to 8/14?
Yeah, we will, once we get all the application that's going to be recommended to move forward, we have to do assessment as far as if we need to do some sort of amendment to the existing contract to address this one. So to ensure there's no gap, there's not gonna be any gap for anybody continuing.
And then I think the last question that we'll read today is in the RFP. It's mentioned that the survey is online. How does this work, and what children who cannot read, children with disabilities, or K-1 required to complete?
Yeah, we wanted to let everybody know that there will be this set outcome that is around program participation, but we understand that for some age groups and some populations, it might not be necessarily the child that completes it or the youth, it might be the family or the parent. So we're taking all of that into account when it comes to the program participation outcome measure.
Okay, I think, Juliet, I'll hand it over to you to wrap us up.
All right, thank you, everyone. I think my camera is acting out. So sorry about that. It was a pleasure having you, and we can feel the excitement and the opportunities that to have some wonderful and exciting program enrichment activity incorporated, no more boring after school or summer camp. So we can't wait to see all your applications. Thank you so much. And like I said before, we're going to record the application training and post it today. So you'll get a notification. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
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 Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Hello, can you put the networking QR code back on the screen again if someone's still there? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you and have a great day.
Gracias.
All right, love the excitement on a Friday. All right, I guess we can shut down. Host, I think you're the host, Rachel.